Welcome to CivilNet, and we're honored to have as our guest today Mr. Tim Jemal, who's the president of Global Arm. And we're here to talk about legislation that his organization, working with Congressman Darrell Issa and others, has introduced, who's called the Peace Act. Thank you for joining us, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Can you tell us exactly what the Peace Act does and why you guys are supportive of it?
Absolutely. So the Peace Act would sanction Azerbaijani's leadership, including Ilham Aliyev, his immediate family members, Azerbaijani military units, foreign financial institutions, including the Central Bank of Azerbaijan, for engaging in hostile actions against Armenia. What's significant about this bill is that it would, for the first time ever, sanction Azerbaijan's main instrument of aggression, its oil and gas sector, for engaging in aggression and hostile actions against Armenia. So that's the crux of the bill. The term hostile action is defined in the bill, and aggression. There are lengthy definitions of what that means when Azerbaijan takes a hostile action or engages in aggression against Armenia. But one of the included in the definition is violations of Armenia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and its political independence. And in that definition, of course, occupation is part of violating Armenia's territorial integrity, its independence, its political independence, and its sovereignty.
Well, I want to talk about SOCAR specifically because in reality, in oil, in countries that are totally dependent on oil for their income, which Azerbaijan is, I think 90% of foreign currencies come from oil and gas sales. There's no difference between sanctioning SOCAR, the oil company, and sanctioning the country. It's actually one and the same. In fact, you're actually sanctioning the currency because in oil-producing countries, the currency is actually tied to your oil production. Is this essentially a checkmate move against the regime by essentially saying any aggression will essentially can be used to bankrupt your country? And is that the reason that you guys went after SOCAR specifically? Because they're obviously the main targets here outside of the regime.
100%. As I said in the opening, the instrument of Azerbaijan and Ilham Aliyev's aggression is oil and gas. Oil and gas in Azerbaijan is dominated by SOCAR. Any bank in the bill, Eric, any bank that has done business with an Azerbaijani bank involving oil and gas sales will no longer be allowed to have accounts move money through banks in the United States. That's in the bill. That effectively cuts them off from the global financial system. And that's the trigger. If the president of the United States determines that there has been aggression by Azerbaijan against Armenia, then that triggers the sanctions against the Central Bank of Azerbaijan and then foreign banks that are facilitating transactions of oil and gas revenues. And this is landmark. Nothing like this has ever happened. And I'll mention at the beginning, Global Arm is supportive of this bill, but the credit goes to Congressman Darrell Issa and Congressman Bilirakis. Darrell Issa, being a member from the state of California, he's a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, been a longtime friend of Armenia, but a very seasoned member of Congress and a significant voice on foreign policy.
As you know,
by the way,
yes.
Sorry, just not just of course, the heart of the bill is the sanctions against the banks and the foreign financial institutions involved in oil and gas, but the other individuals would be sanctioned if it's determined Azerbaijan is engaged in aggression against Armenia, and that includes blocking of property, revocation of visas, denial of visas, inadmission to the United States. Anyone who's facilitated, aided, or abetted Azerbaijan in aggression would be covered under these sanctions.
Yeah, I think this you might be leading to a lot of mansion sales in the United States to be moved to other countries. As you know, in Washington, it's very easy to introduce bills or resolutions, but it is very hard to move them. Obviously, you guys introduced this because you have a vision of how you get this passed through committees, through the Congress, through the Senate, and hopefully get it signed by the President of the United States. Let's talk about this, not about the introduction. Let's talk about this moving forward by turning this into law. Tell us about that process and what are you looking into? What are you looking at exactly?
Okay, I'll before I get to that in a second, let me say this. I want to be really clear about this, and it's one of the reasons why we formed Global Arm. There has not been a significant pro-Armenia, pro-Artsakh legislation approved by Congress and signed by the President of the United States into law in over 25 years. In fact, over the last 25 years, what we've seen is massive decreases in assistance to Armenia, massive increases to Azerbaijan, especially security assistance right before the Artsakh war. And then what we've seen for nearly 25 years is a waiver of what you and I have talked about before, a waiver of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. And as a reminder, Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act prohibits U.S. government assistance to the government of Azerbaijan. Those sanctions have been waived since 2001 and only stopped being waived right after the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan. So the goal here is to do something that's meaningful, that sends the message to Ilham Aliyev that aggression will have consequences. To your point, it's been referred to 3 committees in the. I don't want to get into too much inside baseball, but it's been referred to 3 committees in the House of Representatives. The main committee is House Foreign Affairs. It will have to get through House Foreign Affairs Committee, and then when it gets through that committee, it will. The plan is to move it up to the floor of the House, either independently as a standalone bill or as part of another bill. The Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. It's very helpful to have a senior Republican like Darrell Issa, and then also to have Gus Bilirakis, who's a Republican from Florida, who's also a co-chair of the Armenian caucus, having both of them as lead on this bill. And I believe that the administration, the Trump administration, which is aware of Ilham Aliyev's continued betrayal of the United States when they've warned him not to engage in violence, he has continuously betrayed and lied, frankly, to the United States about not engaging in violence. I believe the administration will come in and support the measure.
One of the things that the critics of this bill say, and that critics are actually one institution, they say that this bill does nothing about prisoner release. It does nothing about the right of return of people to Artsakh, and it does nothing about deoccupation of the areas of Armenia that are occupied by the Baku regime. How do you respond to those critics?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, first on the occupation, the occupation was one of the underlying concerns we had going into discussions about this bill. The bill language is very clear about territorial integrity being violated. It's mentioned in the bill several times. And by the way, the bill only applies to Azerbaijan. It does not apply to Armenia. This is not a reciprocal bill. The bill is directed at Azerbaijan. If they violate Armenia's territorial integrity, if that determination is made, and occupation is a clear violation of that, then the trigger sanction would kick in. On the prisoners and right of return, let me say a couple things. Back in December, before the President Trump was inaugurated, our team at Global Arm had already started meeting with the key Trump administration officials. This is back in December. And then we met again in January. And at that time, they already started talking about prisoner release and right of return. So I saw something recently that someone put out something, I don't know, like last week, that the administration is now talking about prisoner release and right of return. They've been talking about it for 10 months. That's not breaking news. And in fact, as you saw, you might have recalled the first national security advisor, who's now the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz. One of the first tweets he published, or X, when he became national security advisor, was for demanding Aliyev and Baku release the Armenian prisoners. That happened several months ago. We had made that at Global Arm. That was our #1 request to the Trump administration coming in. Send a message to Baku that the prisoners are important to you. So that's absolutely on the agenda. You could criticize the bill for not directly, triggering something related to the prisoners of right of return, but it's already on the agenda. We're already working actively with them, and it's a priority for them. So, and secondly, we are working with Congressman Bilirakis on another bill that has 4 conditions in it that if they are not met, and the 4 conditions are right of return, releasing the prisoners, deoccupation by Azerbaijan, and preservation of historical and religious and cultural identity properties in Nagorno-Karabakh. If those conditions aren't met, then that would trigger increases in U.S. military assistance to Armenia and a reevaluation of their defense capabilities in the face of Azerbaijani threats. That was introduced, Eric, as a standalone amendment several weeks ago. We did that in cooperation with Congressman Bilirakis. That's going to be introduced as a standalone bill in the next few weeks. So we're going to corner Aliyev on all of these issues, and he's not going to be able to escape what's happening in Washington, D.C., despite the fact that they just hired yet another lobbyist to work for them. So now I think they have 5 or 6 different lobbying firms, $500,000 a month, trying to change the narrative, and we're not going to let them do that.
Well, one of the things that's perplexing to me about this opposition to this bill is that if you want all of those other things, which all of us are for, deoccupation, prisoners, it all starts with a secure Armenia. If you have an Armenia whose aggression is taken off the table, that Armenia has a lot more options to engage and push on these other issues, because it's no longer dealing with existential issues or the threat of war, the threat of being attacked. Let's step back and talk about, obviously, there was the historic agreement in August. Some people love it, some people hate it. The peace treaty was not signed, it was initial, that's irrelevant. I'm going to ask you about TRIP. There's a lot of skepticism about this project. This is the Trump Road via Sunik, the U.S.-Armenia partnership. Do you actually think this will happen? And what do you know about this process since the signing in August till today?
Yes, I think it will happen. And what I know is that the administration is trying to put together a financial package that could actually implement the construction of the Trump route, the TRIP, as you mentioned, which is roads and railways and bridges and other infrastructure that's needed in southern Armenia. I do believe it's going to happen. I think we'll see in the coming months a groundbreaking that will occur in Sunik, and that will begin the construction of TRIP. I can understand, I guess, some skepticism, but it's going to happen. I mean, there's a strong commitment from the White House, from State Department, from the National Security Council, from Vice President Vance. It will happen. It's not going to be called the Zangezur Corridor, that bullshit, preposterous name that Aliyev keeps trying to invoke. That's gone. It's no longer. It wasn't ever that, and he can keep trying to invoking that name, but it will happen, Eric. It's not something that's for a social media to score points on social media. This will happen. There will be a groundbreaking, and the construction will start taking place. I think in the next few months you will see that.
I'm going to close with something more broader and universal. Obviously, we're dealing with a 20-25 year struggle with the regime in Baku. this notion of we have permanent peace, I think a lot of that talk is frankly fictitious and not dealing with objective realities. Tell us about what's your broader agenda of how do we approach this regime? Is it a process of delegitimizing, criminalizing, marginalizing? What's the agenda for the next coming many years, not for the next coming months?
So I would say we're talking about Global Arm, our agenda as a active diaspora lobbying group. And remember, I haven't reminded people yet, we have a Democratic lobbying operation that focuses on Democrats, and we have a Republican lobbying operation that focuses on Republicans and the Trump administration. And they've been fabulous at making inroads and building deep trust, especially with the Trump administration, as we've been talking to them about all these issues. Eric, I think it's a multifaceted approach. It's through our engagement with the administration on assuring that Armenia remains a strategic priority and a strategic ally for the United States. That's very significant. That's something that had never occurred since Armenia's independence, and now we have a strategic ally between the United States and Armenia. Therefore, what happens in Armenia is in the strategic and national security interests of the United States. I think with respect to Aliyev and Azerbaijan, it's our role is to make sure that there's accountability. That's been missing over the last 25, 30 years. There's been no accountability for aggression. And of course, the famous line by former Assistant Secretary of State Yuri Kim that the United States will not countenance aggression or an ethnic cleansing against Nagorno-Karabakh, implying there will be consequences when they were not. There has to be consequences. And to your point earlier about security in Armenia, I mean, one of the things Ilham Aliyev fears most is that Armenia is somehow going to catch up to them in terms of military capacity and its security deterrence. That's what we're focused on. Not in a provocative way, but in a way that Armenia should be able to defend its borders and its sovereignty and its territorial integrity, and to not be repeatedly threatened or bullied by Aliyev. And I think that having the U.S. engagement in this process is very significant. I mean, don't forget, in the November 9th agreement, which was awful, very bad, after the Artsakh War of 2020, the Sunik was supposed to be controlled by the Russians. This road that they had, I think I forgot which article it was in the November 9th agreement, that was supposed to be Russian control.
Yeah, but not just Russia, by the Foreign Intelligence Service.
Correct.
Yeah, FSB.
And so the FSB. So what Tripp has done in August 8th, even with the critics, it's being done under Armenian sovereignty, and the alternative, which under November 9th would have been even more disastrous. And then the second option, which Aliyev had threatened to do, and which U.S. intelligence confirmed was happening, is that Aliyev was going to try to take Sunik by force, even though he still occupies parts of it. He was going to go further. That's been stopped. That's been deterred. So I think what we're doing is creating a stronger Armenia through a stronger U.S. Armenia alliance, aggression deterrence, and then consequences for action. So we know, Eric, we all know Aliyev has lied in the past. He's going to lie in the future. I think when you saw him on August 8th at the White House, it was like an out-of-body experience, watching him talking about peace and reconciliation and not engaging in aggression. And because he's never spoken that way before, he said it one day for 1 hour. And even since the agreement, he's been bellicose and recalcitrant in terms of his rhetoric and continuing hate towards Armenians. And I think it would be wise for Ilham Aliyev to realize, for example, this bill is serious. This bill is real. If he needs to get out of Armenia, and he needs to release those prisoners, and then we're going to put forward a pathway forward for right of return for Artsakh refugees.
Thank you, Tim, for joining us. Thank you for this informative conversation.
Thanks, Eric, for having me.
Thank you for joining us at CivilNet today.